Hi, I'm Dr. David Purvis. Have you ever wondered why it is that this sense of anxiety, a sense of threat, a feeling of fear, uneasiness just sort of jumps into your consciousness when really you wouldn't expect it to? You're not necessarily doing anything that warrants that level of sort of threat or anxiety. Well, my clients have been telling me this week, following the Paris atrocities, the terrorist atrocities in 2015, that they're feeling an elevated sense of threat. And I just wanted to explain a little bit more of how that happens, how something which happens in a different country can increase your sense of threat here in the UK, for instance. So in my diagram, I've got a little diagram of elements of the fear recognition, threat recognition system. In the first instance, I've got here sensory information. Now, you may know that your brain filters out the vast majority of the sensory information that comes in through your five senses. There are only 5 ways for information to get into you and get into your mind through your senses: touch, taste, hearing, sound and smell. Those are your senses. It can't get in any other way. But if all of the information from those senses went straight into your consciousness, this is your level of consciousness here, you'd be overwhelmed. You don't need to hear every single tree. You don't need to recognize the sound of the engine of every single car. You don't need to smell everything. You don't need to hear every word of every conversation everybody speaks in your proximity. You'd be overloaded. You wouldn't be able to function. You'd be like that. So what happens is the sensory information is filtered, so it goes through a filtration system, but the filtration system has to do a kind of a low-level sweep of this information to see whether it's of use to you, to see whether it has any value, because you don't want to miss information which has value. And so the stuff which is considered to be of no value is discarded, and the stuff which is considered to be of value is kept and passed through the next level. Now, if you're an animal on the Serengeti, what kind of information would be absolutely the sort of thing that you would not want to miss? Well, obviously, it's potential threats, isn't it? It's a predator looking for a prey animal. It's somebody trying to kill you. It's something which will affect your survival. And the bit of the brain that's responsible for detecting and labeling threat is the amygdala. Now, your amygdala is uniquely designed to be a threat recognition system. It's in the limbic system on the side of your brain, just sort of down here. Now, the amygdala is fed information from your sensory system, and the amygdala decides if it's threatening information. Now, a terrorist attack where people are killed, something which is kind of horrible and kind of amazing in its atrocity, always gets into the amygdala, and because your amygdala wants to keep you safe, which is its basic function is to recognize and describe threats, but that also implies keeping you safe. It pushes that, it promotes that information into your consciousness, and so you become aware of an elevated sense of threat because your amygdala has told you that there is threat. Once threat gets into your sense of consciousness, once you become aware of threat, well, what do you do with threat? If you felt uneasy, if you felt a little bit anxious, if you felt a little bit fearful, if you felt a little bit uncertain, what is the obvious thing that you would do? And you can't help it. Well, you'd look to see where the threat, to see where the sense of unease is coming from. You would focus, it's called orientation. You'd orient to what the problem is, because then if you can see it, you can deal with it. But of course, for most anxiety, there isn't a threat that you can see. So this elevated level of threat orients you to something, but what? Well, what happens is, in the Paris atrocities instance, people become more focused on the possibility that they could be the victim of a terrorist attack. And that then puts them into worry mode, because there aren't any terrorist attacks going on right now. I feel threatened. Yeah, but what if I was the victim of one? What if there was one in London? What if there's one in Reading, where I am right now? How would I cope? And what would it be like if the people that I knew were victims? And this worry mode amplifies, goes round and around and around, thinking of all the possible scenarios of what it'd be like to be involved in a terrorist attack. And it elevates the level of anxiety, because anxiety goes up with increased worry. And in the end, this worry mode, this constant going round the circle of what might happen and how terrible it would be, makes the contents of the worry seem more and more valid, and it makes the risk seem more and more strong and real. And the reality is, the risk actually is unchanged. The funny thing is that often people say, well, I better stay home, I better stay in the house, I better not mix, I better not fly, I better not go with the wrong crowds, I better just sort of hunker down and try to stay safe. Which is paradoxical, because the home is not that safe a place. Every year, about 8 to 10 people die from scalding accidents, electrocutions, about 60 odd people die from falling downstairs, about 10 to 15 people die from just slipping and hitting their head in the bathroom, and maybe even accidentally drowning. The home is not a safe place. It's certainly no safer than being out on the street. So staying home, withdrawing and restricting your life, actually is what I call a false control strategy. It doesn't make you, well, it makes you feel like you're doing something, but it doesn't actually make you safer, and it restricts your life, and it puts you down a path of ever more tightening control to try and stay safe, when actually the level of risk that you're under hasn't changed. Your risk remains unchanged. This system always is in play if you struggle with anxiety. If you've had anxiety for a period of time, your amygdala has got really practiced at detecting every sort of thing that might possibly be a threat. And so it throws a lot of stuff up into consciousness, which makes you worry. So if you say, well, I'm a worrier, this is the reason, because your amygdala is giving you this sense of threat, and you have to do something with it. You've got to kind of try and process it and manage it. But in fact, your risk is no different from my risk. Our risk of dying on any particular day is about 1 in 1 million, and that's just what it is, really. And it won't ever get lower than that, whether you stay home or mix with crowds. So this is how it is. This is how it works. And this is a part of the process that gives you the sense of anxiety. If you want to know what to do about it, I've got a nice technique and intervention which I've developed, which I think helps us to get some real control back, instead of allowing the false control that's created from the worry mode be in charge. So if you're interested to know about something that you can do about this process, tune in to the next film and I'll offer you a nice tool or a technique that you can use in your everyday life. And it's a nice way of taking control of that worry process.